Then we're moving on to Standing Committee Report 1168. Representative Belatti.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a floor amendment to offer.
Mr. Clerk, have copies of the floor amendment been distributed to the members?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Copies of floor amendment number 2 have been distributed.
Representative Belatti.
Madam Speaker, I move to adopt the floor amendment.
Representative Souza.
Madam Speaker, I second the motion.
Any discussion on the proposed floor amendment? Representative Belatti.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In support of this floor amendment,
Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, I offer this floor amendment with the deepest of aloha for all of my colleagues in this chamber, especially to the chairs this year who worked so diligently on this matter, to the members of the Women's Legislative Caucus who over the years have worked on the measures that have led up to the current law, and to my colleague from Kapolei who seconded this floor amendment. In my 18 years, Madam Speaker, this is an unusual thing for me to do. I don't and cannot recall a time when a floor amendment has been offered on a measure where members of two different parties have moved and seconded it. This floor amendment makes 3 substantively important changes. First, in the area of protections of constitutional rights. I have said on this floor in the past that one of the North Stars guiding our decision-making on this floor is respect for our Constitution, the United States Constitution and the Hawaii State Constitution. I would also add to that, as a guiding North Star, our community. It is because of the Constitution and the community that one of the areas of changes introduced by this floor amendment adds a religious exemption that honors our constitutional obligation to protect the free exercise of religion. The religious exemption added into this floor amendment mirrors the same religious exemption that we have in HRS Chapter 457-13 for nurses. So we already have that in statute for other nurses, for other healthcare providers, and it is appropriate for this measure. The second substantive area that is addressed by this floor amendment is the reinstatement of the birth attendant to deal with traditional practitioners. Finding that that person has committed misconduct or is criminally or civilly liable for conduct relating to midwifery by another licensing authority shall not. The third substantive area, Madam Speaker, amended by this floor amendment is to create a pathway so that our people here who do not have access or the resources to go to school far from these shores, it creates a second pathway of certification through the North American Registry of Midwives portfolio evaluation process pathway in order to enable those persons to obtain a midwifery bridge certificate. The current pathway, both in the underlying bill, has already been determined by the Circuit Court to be an infringement upon individuals' reasonable exercise because they either require excessive education, do not exist in the state, or place unreasonable barriers on those persons and those similarly situated. For all of those reasons, Madam Speaker, I offer this amendment and speak in strong support. Thank you.
Representative Souza.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the floor amendment.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I stand with my colleague from Makiki in her remarks, and I would like to have her words inserted into the journal as my own.
So ordered.
I also just wanted to point to some of the important aspects of this amendment. And the first is in relation to the exemptions that's included. And I think it's important that we very clearly outline that the exemptions that you see in the amendment before you, especially when it comes to Native Hawaiian cultural and traditional practitioners. I am concerned that without these exemptions being very specifically stated, that Native Hawaiian cultural and traditional practitioners could face penalties or possible criminalization. upon practicing midwifery. And I think that in order to combat that in the current bill language, we would need perhaps a written opinion or a letter from the Attorney General to address that particular issue. I also believe that it's important to safeguard the bill generally with a severability clause. So for those reasons, I stand in support. Thank you.
Representative Iwamoto,
I rise in support.
please proceed.
This bill currently requires Hawaii residents, why I support this amendment is because the current bill requires Hawaii residents to enroll in a mainland school to become a licensed midwife. The bill as it currently stands and the amendment seeks to fix, the amendment will allow Hawaii residents to achieve licensure through the portfolio evaluation process or PEP pathway. 27 states and Washington, D.C. recognize this portfolio evaluation pathway to achieve licensure. There may have been some misstatements made in a hearing that only 5 states allow that, but that is incorrect. And that was verified by the Center for Reproductive Rights. And we've heard testimony from some young women who are actually going through an apprenticeship pathway. Currently, if the bill unamended goes forward, it will close the door on them practicing through their apprenticeship. NARM, which the bill cites many times as a licensure authority, NARM's board member, Dr. Melissa Cheney, as an expert witness for the current court case in litigation, testified that there is no evidence that midwives who go through the midwifery school process have any better clinical outcomes than ones who go through the PEP pathway or apprenticeship process to become a licensed midwife. This is what is so infuriating for local midwives. They see their counterparts from the mainland recognized by the state for their practice and apprenticeship, but the local midwives are made to feel like criminals for the very same, if not better, practice and apprenticeship. Thank you very much.
Any further comments on the proposed floor amendment? Representative Cochran.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. And I rise in strong support and want to take the words of Representative Makiki as if my own. And I just, a brief comment.
Please
I
proceed.
support the intent to, raising up our own, right? It's like we always talk about train the trainer, build our own workforce and what have you. This is the same concept, and this is for health, safety, and just perpetuating our traditional cultural practices here with our people. And so if this can move us towards that end goal, then I'm very supportive and stand strong in support of this amendment. Mahalo.
Thank you. Representative Takayama.
In opposition to the proposed amendment,
Please proceed.
I'd like to address the 3 issues brought up by the proponents of this amendment in order. First of all, the religious exemption proposed under the amendment is not necessary because in the underlying bill there is no mention of religious beliefs. There are no qualifications or standards to be a birth attendant. Therefore, no protection for mothers nor infants, which is the full intent of this bill. Third, the portfolio evaluation process that is proposed by this amendment should not be a pathway for licensure because it fails to meet international and national standards. I would note that the bill proposes adopting the accreditation standards of the Midwifery Education Accreditation Council. Only 5 states, again, only 5 states allow the portfolio evaluation process as a pathway to licensure. For all these reasons, Madam Speaker, I ask that my colleagues reject the proposed amendment. Thank you.
Any further comments? Representative Hussey.
Madam Speaker, our state has a troubling history with how we have dealt with Native Hawaiian traditional and cultural practice. We can think back, before the time of statehood to, for instance, the early attempts to criminalize hula, the Hawaiian language, the basic practice of Hawaiian religion. These are all parts of our history, and which is also one of the reasons why in the 1978 Constitutional Convention, the framers of that document made sure that there's language in there that protects Hawaiian traditional customary practices. The people who carry on these traditions, primarily the mothers, the midwives, and other birth workers, their ability to carry on those traditions is incumbent on the ability to access training and legal abilities to practice those traditions. If we have to go someplace far, far away, it makes it that much harder to practice those traditions. It reminds me, frankly, of the way in which, we all love going to the beach. One of the reasons why we're able to go to access public beaches in Hawaii is because of traditional rights, carried on since the kingdom times to access public beaches. It's enshrined for instance, in the Pash lawsuit. Yet we still see instances where people, property owners, put up gates preventing access to public shorelines. What we see in the original bill in taking away that ability to use the PEP pathway is it's akin to putting up a gate to access these traditional customary rights. So I will vote in favor of the amendment because it does provide that access. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Peruso.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In strong support of the amendment.
Please proceed.
So it's my understanding, my position, that this measure needs to be amended to expand rather than restrict access to midwifery as it currently does. As currently written, this bill effectively excludes local midwives, particularly Native Hawaiian, and those in rural communities, not by language, but by the erasure of language. The amendment helps to add in exemptions and add in pathways to access that will change the effects of this measure. And by recognizing these alternative licensure pathways, which has been mentioned before, we can remove some barriers. So if we're committed to equity and reproductive justice, we need to work on removing these barriers. House Bill 1194 should include, as has been mentioned, the portfolio evaluation process, PEP, as a recognized pathway to licensure. The North American Registry of Midwives, NARM, offers two rigorous routes to certification, the MEEK pathway and the PEP pathway. The MEEK pathway requires graduation from one of 8 accredited schools, none of which exist in Hawaii, just to clarify and reassert that fact, and the PEP pathway, which offers midwives the opportunity to train through supervised apprenticeships. Both pathways require extensive hands-on experience and passing the same standardized exam. NARM has affirmed that they are equally rigorous, and more than half of all certified professional midwives, CPMs, nationally are credentialed through the PEP. Yet HB 1194 excludes this proven route, making licensure nearly impossible for many aspiring midwives in Hawaii. Currently, under this exclusionary approach, none of the 42 licensed midwives are Native Hawaiians, and only one of the 42 licensed midwives is born and raised in Hawaii. So licensure, from my view, is it should not be a tool of exclusion. And I say this as someone who takes licensure very seriously as a teacher. Regulation must be established to ensure safety and accountability, but without blocking qualified professionals from serving their communities. We need to expand our pathways. By expanding these licensure pathways, we can support local midwives and increase our access to culturally competent care. HB 1194 has the potential to be an equity-centered bill if we amend it. I urge my colleagues to support these changes as the bill moves so that we can pass a measure that uplifts our local midwives and ensures that all local families, all Hawaii families, have the care they need. Mahalo.
Representative Ichiyama,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to the floor amendment.
please proceed.
I'm in opposition to the proposed floor amendment because it directly contradicts the recommendation of the Office of the Auditor in its recent sunset analysis on the regulation of the profession of midwifery, report number 25-03. In analyzing whether HRS Chapter 457J should sunset, the auditor looked to our own state laws on regulation of professions. HRS Chapter 26H-2 states that the legislature hereby adopts the following policies regarding the regulation of certain professions and vocations. The regulation and licensing of professions and vocations shall be undertaken only where reasonably necessary to protect the health, safety, or welfare of consumers of the services. There is reasons I'm in opposition to the floor amendment. Thank you.
Representative Belatti, for the second time.
Thank you. In brief rebuttal and request to insert written comments, our obligation when we look at a law is to see if it's going to be applied fairly. And while the bill may not have explicitly called out religious practices, we do know that we are a cosmopolitan community. And we do know that there are Jewish midwives who may be affected. We know that there are other religions that have midwifery practices, and we need to actively, proactively support and protect those religious practices when we know there might be a flaw. As I have stated with the underlying law, I have advised members of this body that there was potential challenges. And no matter what the auditor may determine, we have to determine it, and that it is the courts to determine the constitutionality. And in this instance, the underlying bill has flaws that we need to address in order to protect and balance our constitutional obligations. Secondly, Madam Speaker, with respect to, again, what the auditor has recommended, the provision of the traditional birth attendant does have consumer protections in this floor amendment. And so it balances the protections for traditional, customary, religious practices with the need to protect our community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Cochrane.
I just feel like fighting this corporate colonization from the medical profession here. I just feel like this bill needs to open and broaden the participation of anyone who chooses to go down this path. And as currently written, it is very limiting. So, and again, I'm very supportive of this amendment moving forward and to decriminalize this practice that is, on the line of traditional cultural practitioner. And also, flying over here, I was thinking about Moses and the midwives were set him free down the river, So they're always been here from eons ago, protecting, women, babies, and childbirth. And so this is what I'm hoping at the end of the day we can make these amendments to support that. So mahalo for this opportunity.
There are no further comments. Members, we are going to take a voice vote. Representative Iwamoto.
I'd like to request a roll call vote.
Okay, all those in, we will ask for a vote on the roll call. All those in favor of a roll call vote, please signify such by raising your hands. Mr. Clerk, is there a sufficient number of votes? Keep your hands up.
Madam Speaker, there is a sufficient number of hands.
Okay. The floor, okay, so please, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Alcos? Ms. Amato? Ms. Bellotti? Mr. Chun? Ms. Cochran? Mr. Evslin? Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garrett? Ms. Grandinetti? Mr. Hashem? Mr. Holt? Mr. Hussey? Ms. Ichiyama? Mr. Iligan? Ms. Iwamoto? Ms. Kahaloa? Ms. Capella? Ms. Kohokapu Liloi? Mr. Kila? Ms. Kitagawa? Mr. Kong? Mr. Kush? Ms. Lachika? Ms. Lamosau? Mr. Lee? Ms. Lowen? Ms. Martin? Mr. Matayoshi? Ms. Matsumoto? Mr. Miyake? Ms. Morikawa? Mr. Muraoka? Mr. Olds? Ms. Peruso? Mr. Perrick?
Excused.
Ms. Poi Poi? Mr. Quinlan? Ms. Reyes Oda? Mr. Sayama? Mr. Shimizu? Ms. Souza? Mr. Takeyama? Ms. Takenouchi? Mr. Tam? Mr. Tarnas? Ms. Templo? Mr. Todd? Mr. Ward?
Excused.
Mr. Woodson? Mr. Yamashita? Madam Speaker.
No.
Madam Speaker, we count 15 ayes, 34 noes, and 2 excused.
The floor amendment has failed. Members, we're back on the main motion. Representative Bellotti.
Madam Speaker, I have a second floor amendment to offer, but I think this probably could go more quickly.
Representative Souza.
Madam Speaker, I second the motion.
Representative Bellotti.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, because this bill deals with such important, critical areas of the law and concerns so many important constitutional protections, this floor amendment is offered to ensure further discussion before it leaves our chambers by adding, most importantly, a defective date of June 29, 2000 to make sure that there is further consideration and work to be done to address the concerns raised. This also includes a severability clause for Chapter 457J. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Souza.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong support of this floor amendment.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I would also like the words of the representative from Makiki inserted into the record as my own.
So ordered.
And I also do want to express the importance of the severability clause. As everyone could tell with just the previous floor amendment, that there are concerns, and we need to make sure that we have the proper legal remedy in place by explicitly stating the severability clause in this particular bill in order to rectify any issues that could potentially be a problem in the future without rendering the entire bill invalid.
As far as adding a defective date, I would note to the members that this measure has been thoroughly discussed in not one, not two, but 3 committees. By my count, it's undergone more than 5 hours of hearings before the Health, and Consumer Protection and Finance Committees, and we believe that it is ready for enactment. The Senate, which is to consider this measure, is free to disagree with us. But again, I ask my colleagues to reject this amendment as unnecessary and unwarranted. Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, Representative Belatti.
Sorry, brief rebuttal. Just because, again, this measure
Are you
affects- in support of the floor amendment.
Please proceed.
Because this can affect so many lives and constitutional protections, our custom and practice in this building has been to send over bills that are truly works in progress over to the other chamber with defective dates. And to honor that custom and practice, if there are any concerns that this underlying bill could be problematic, could expend and use state resources at a time when we need our litigators to be litigating other things, I urge that this body send a clear message to the other chamber that there are problems with the underlying bill by supporting this floor amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? If not, members, we're going to take a voice vote.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to.
Representative Souza.
Thank you. Also, brief rebuttal. Still in strong support of the floor amendment. Can I proceed?
Please proceed.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate the fact that we're just trying to do our due diligence with this floor amendment so that we can add the legal aspect of the severability clause to make sure that the entirety of the bill is not rendered invalid. If any portion is deemed invalid, it will not render the entire bill invalid. And also, every bill so far, to my knowledge, that we're currently moving over to the Senate has a defective date. And so I will reiterate that that is our custom and practice in this building. And that's just to my knowledge. I could be wrong. But we're simply doing our due diligence with this particular amendment. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, members, we're going to take a voice vote. Vote aye if you are in favor of the floor amendment. Vote no if you are opposed to the floor amendment. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The floor amendment has failed. Members, we are back to the main motion. Any discussion on HCR 1168? Representative Alcos.
On this bill, I oppose. Just to me, it's like helping people was a way of life all this time. Before hospitals was in there, someone getting hurt, fell down, there was someone in your community being able to help, being able to support someone out there that needs medical assistance. Midwives are just trying to do the right thing, the things to help someone out. But it seems like every time they're running to help that person, there's red tapes, more red tapes or a hurdle they have to jump over. Another hurdle puts in the way, they have to jump over to help that person. And all they're trying to do is do their job in what we was trained to do. When we see someone get hurt, nowadays you're gonna be like, don't touch them, because you're not a doctor. Someone fall off a tree or someone get in a car accident, don't touch them, because maybe their neck, you're not a doctor. But in this situation, they've been practicing this for mostly all their lives. It's not an amateur just going in there and doing the work. This comes between safety. And if you're in a remote location and you don't have the access to help these mothers that giving birth, or the way that they was always there to run to an area to help this person. I think that government is overreach, state is overreach, and clear their path, take away the hurdles, and let them be able to help. And I think it's a good thing in helping families out there. So for that, I'm up. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, Representative Martin.
I stand in strong support.
Please proceed.
This bill mostly details the scope of practice for licensed midwives, allowing them to serve women in our state to the full extent of their training. However, the major motivation of the bill is to keep mothers and their much anticipated babies as safe as possible when they choose a birth in an out-of-hospital setting. Consumers will enjoy a broader range of services within the home birth or other birth setting, including diagnostic testing, the use of prescription medication, and medical devices within their licensed midwife scope of practice. The accredited education required provides consumers of home birth services with assurance that their midwife has certain skills and knowledge. Having a license also gives consumers a path for recourse in the case of malpractice. The bill includes an unconditional exemption for traditional and customary Native Hawaiian practices as guaranteed in the Hawaii Constitution. This addresses fully the court ruling that found the recognition by Papa'ololokahi Kupuna councils too restrictive. For those that do choose to become a licensed professional midwife in our state, there are options for fully online coursework and local clinical preceptors, which costs about $15,000 total. A typical home birth fee is $9,000, so direct costs for such an education could be recuperated with just a few clients. The safety net will remain in place in our emergency rooms for failed home births, but it is my hope that with these regulations, the safety net will be used less frequently than it is today, and that failed home births will no longer account for a disproportionate number of patients in our neonatal ICU, found in our only scientific study of the impact of planned home births. This is not a bill that was made in a vacuum. This is a bill that responds to an actual problem in our communities and in our hospitals when things go very poorly in an unregulated industry where mothers and sometimes their deceased infant ends up in the hospital to have that death recorded in the hospital, even though it was not due to a hospital service, it was due to an unregulated industry. For those reasons, I support this bill.
Representative Reyes-Oda.
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition.
Please proceed.
This bill clarifies the scope of midwifery practice in the state, carves out exceptions for traditional Native Hawaiian healers performing cultural rites as protected by the Hawaii State Constitution, as well as clarifies the process for renewals and exemptions for licensure. While I understand the necessity of heightened regulation stemming from reports published by the auditor and the vitality of competent care for mothers and babies, I still have concerns unaddressed by the current language. I acknowledge that the evolution of the House drafts were attempts by the respective committees to strike a balance between regulation and feasibility for local midwives to practice seamlessly in the state. However, I still feel that there are some matters left unresolved. The House Draft 1 created greater clarity for Native Hawaiian traditional practitioners to be able to continue their practices uninterrupted, but I believe that this piece requires greater strengthening to ensure that cultural and spiritual birth practices are clearly protected. Additionally, the current language of the bill fails to adopt an amendment including the PEP midwifery bridge pathway to be accepted for those who obtain it after January 1st, 2020, providing local student midwives with equitable access to licensure. Furthermore, the current language does not allow certified professional midwives to practice to their fullest scope of training, which can ultimately reduce out-of-pocket costs to families who choose these healthcare professionals. Finally, this bill has an effective date which prohibits further discussion. This is concerning as it is very nuanced and complex issues require more collective discussion. For these reasons, I oppose.
Any further discussion? Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise in very strong opposition, and
please proceed.
You know, there was another bill, HB1328, which I felt really was given a chance. And in that in itself, just the beauty of it being a bipartisan bill, having support from both houses was incredible in itself. And you saw that in the floor amendments too, so I appreciate that. But this bill was written by so many people from across the nation and our families and our practitioners right here in our Hawaii.
Representative Cochran, are you talking about HB 1194?
I'm saying why I don't support it, and the reason being is because there was something on the floor. It was not given its due diligence. I heard that things have been vetted thoroughly. Well, I beg to differ on that. This bill was side by side with this 1194, and this moved forward with 75 in support, 300 in opposition, versus the other bill that had 700 plus in support. So I don't know what that is. I listen to my constituents and the voters and the voices of the community that I represent. And what I represent is House District 14 with rural communities. Thank God for people like Ki'i Kaho'ohanohano, who was there after the fire to help our pregnant women. There was no services. Till today, we don't have services on our side of the island when the road shut down. We have one hospital on that entire island. And rural areas like Hakaloa, I flew off a cliff driving that road. That is not a safe road. God forbid someone has some type of emergency, a mother giving birth, trying to give birth. Ha'ena, where your island. Puna, it's like statewide, we need this practice. And I just don't get why it has been controversial since the day I arrived on this floor. It is so heartbreaking because people's lives are endangered, and these are mothers, I believe, who should have the choice. This is what it's about, too. Choice of who they want to attend their birth, such a sacred thing in a mother's, in a female's life. And this is prohibiting. And for us to get our traditional cultural practitioners and our people of Hawaii to raise into this level and to pursue their practice, this is hindering all of it. So I don't agree at all with this. And thank you to Chair Bellotti, who tried to amend this to avoid us, this body, from being taken into litigation. There is a litigation that had put out that won in court, and yet this isn't even taking that into consideration. I take offense to that. So I'm very emotional about this subject, and I just wish that people could see it too. So thank you for this time, opportunity for me to speak my piece. Mahalo.
Representative Iwamoto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition. I'd like
Please proceed.
Thank you. I'd like the words of the representative from Lahaina to be entered into the record as my own. Thank you.
So ordered. Representative Garcia.
Same request.
So ordered. Representative Muraoka.
Same request.
So ordered. Representative Ichiyama.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support.
Please proceed.
Permission to insert written comments into the journal.
Please, so ordered.
And I would just like to share with my colleagues a story that I received from a former client of an unlicensed person. And I've edited this story so that their personal details are not revealed. So for those reasons, I'm in support of House Bill 1194. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Bellotti.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In opposition.
Please proceed for the second time. Or is this your first? Okay.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge that heartbreaking story of the previous speaker. As health chair, I led the effort in many ways to ensure that we really had a strong regulation for midwives. I began that process with then health chair who is now our current governor, and it took many, many years to get us to this point. There have been so many heartbreaking stories along the way. But I would note that there has been no complaint that I know of when the current law was in place that recognized traditional birth attendants and provided consumer protections, such as the plan if there were to be some need to go to the hospital, where there was disclosures and informed consents between the practicing midwife, birth attendant, and the mother who was choosing that birth setting. And this is a hard area. I myself am a mother. I would not choose a home birth. I would choose the medical hospital setting. But also as a woman who believes that that act of birthing is a choice. That is the mother's choice. The current law and this bill, with its criminalization of some of those practices that we have seen can result in good outcomes and has not resulted in any complaints while those same protections were in place for the last several years, shows to me that there is a pathway for a better law, and that as it currently stands, the criminalization, the erasure of what we know are some very good practitioners in our community is something that we cannot allow for this bill to do. So as this bill hopefully continues to move forward, noting that my own opposition, there is a framework, a place for this bill to be improved. But as it currently stands, as it is drafted, I am in opposition. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any further discussion? Representative Takayama.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to, in support,
Please proceed.
and I believe it's important to recognize in the Vice Speaker's comments the importance of preserving a woman's right to choose their preferred method of safe birth. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Cochrane, followed by Representative Tam.
Thank you, Speaker, for my second time around. I'm so sad, to hear about the negative impacts, that have occurred. But there's always a risk on every level, in the hospital, out of the, whichever practices. All the people I've spoken to, the different people from different countries I've spoken to, midwives are part of their everyday working and hospitals. They work in conjunction with, and they welcome the practice of midwifery within their medical institutions and facilities. We don't, and that's what boggles my mind also. And I was speaking to a guy, we were working together in the yard, and his wife, they did both, hospital and he goes, hands down, both of them would do home births because of the process with your midwifery, your midwife that follows you from before, during, and after. You build this really tight, close relationship with, versus book a appointment in and out, and this is a relationship building. And so it's such a beautiful type of setting, and the surrounding of your own home versus a cold type of environment in a hospital type of thing. And so again, I think this is such a needed experience for, it's an option, but also everybody I've spoken to that have experienced midwifery practice and giving birth at home has nothing but beautiful and positive comments to say about it. That people are pointing, that are supportive of the bill, are pointing that midwifery is dangerous, and it's killed, and it's maimed, and it's a negative practice, which I beg to differ and totally do not concur with, because of the comments I've heard internationally and here also. So I urge everyone to please support it. It's due. It's way overdue. As Chair Belatti had mentioned, that it's been a work in progress for a long time, and please support it.
Representative Tam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In support.
Please proceed.
I would just like to have the words of the representative from Waimanalo, the representative from Salt Lake, as well as our health chair's words inserted into the journal as if it was my own, and permission to provide for your comments as well.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill for many of the reasons that were said on the floor, but I do want to make a note of clarification that House Bill 1328 was given a fair hearing on February 10th, so that the comments made by the representative from Lahaina regarding this bill not giving its fair day is utterly false.
Any further discussion? Representative Hussey,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In opposition.
please proceed.
I also would like to appreciate the Vice Speaker for sharing that very emotional story, and it is quite unfortunate. I can also share my own family's story, if I may, which is that we have had 3 children, 2 of which were born at home with a midwife, and a third which was born in a hospital, in a birthing center with a midwife. And I think also we preferred the 2 that were born at home. Not the kids, but the experience. And part of it is simply that, you know, it was a context and a setting in which my wife was able to exercise her full choice, you know, as a mother, about the birthing experience that she wanted for herself and for our children. So I just wanted to enter that into the record and to provide some additional context. And the final thing I wanted to mention, Madam Speaker, is simply that, and you know, this is in reply to comments made earlier by the representative from Waimanalo, is I guess fundamentally my experience as a father who has dealt with midwives and et cetera, is that my sense is that it's a community of people that does not think of it as an industry. You know, the comments were about it being an unregulated industry, but fundamentally, I believe that these are people who are doing work out of love and out of a desire to provide the best possible care for mothers. So thank you very much.
Representative, it's getting late for me. Representative
Martin.
Martin.
They never castigate the mother or make them feel bad for their choice, right? It is their role. They want people to come in. They want people to feel comfortable coming in. So they never put that on the mother. And I have heard some stories where they have had a mother in ICU for 4 days and later saw a post on social media saying she had such a great home birth experience. So I don't know to what extent the mothers don't understand that a healthy mother with a healthy pregnancy should not be in ICU for 4 days, but this is a kind of situation that we are faced with, and it is a regulation of this industry and standards and recourse for malpractice that motivates me to support this bill.
Any further comments? Representative Peruso.
In opposition, and I just,
What is your position?
In opposition.
Thank
Yes.
you. Please proceed.
So, and basically, on the same grounds that I articulated earlier with respect to the amendment, but I would also like to request to insert additional comments in the journal.
So ordered.
For the sake of time.
Appreciate that. Representative Lechica.
Madam Speaker, in strong support, and may please adopt the words of the Health Chair, the representative from Lanikai, as well as the Vice Speaker into the journal as if they were my own.
So ordered.
And just brief comment, I mean, as a mom, like many of you who have had to endure many, many hours of labor, thankfully and very gratefully have had 2 very beautiful children. I mean, this involves, you know, critical, quick decision-making, anesthesia, drugs, and I mean, I just believe that, you know, every mother and every newborn just deserves the best possible care. So, strong support, Madam Speaker.
Are there any other comments? Representative Souza.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition, just a brief comment.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I feel that this bill is just not robust enough. I think it's still a work in progress. Thank you to Vice Speaker for sharing that very heartbreaking story. and for sharing her perspectives. I also feel that there's no explicit safeguards, or not enough explicit safeguards within the bill, especially when it comes to Native Hawaiian cultural and traditional practitioners. Thank you.
Representative Belatti for the second time.
Yes, in opposition for the second time, just a request to insert written comments.
Please, so ordered. Representative Poi Poi.
Thank you, Speaker. In opposition, but I also want to acknowledge and appreciate, I know this was a big lift and it was a work in progress for a really long time, so I just want to acknowledge the work that went into the bill. I have a very new concern that it's just a very new concern based on what's going on in our government. I'm thinking about, in my district, thousands and thousands of constituents, residents on Medicaid. And Medicaid is, I think, expected to become increasingly unstable, uncertain, whether or not they're going to continue to have their coverage. If expectant mothers lose coverage, they may not have the choice to access hospital or clinical birth options, and home birth may be their only option, especially from neighbor islands that have to travel to Oahu sometimes weeks ahead of time. That cost just cannot be covered without insurance. So that's newly on my mind. I wish it didn't have to be, but it is. And so, yeah, I think for me, keeping accessible home birth resources in our neighborhoods and communities for underserved areas is part of the reason for my opposition. Thank you.
For StanCom report number 1168, HB number 1194 HD2, the following vote no. Amato, Belatti, Cochran, Grandinetti, Hussey, Iwamoto, Peruso, Poi Poi.
SCR 1168, House Bill 1194, House Draft 2. Reps Alcos, Garcia, Matsumoto, Muraoka, Shimizu, Reyes Oda, and Souza votes no.
The motion is carried. The House stands adjourned until 12 noon Thursday.